What is good, y'all, and welcome back. I am so excited to bring you the new Planeswalker. I know some other folks have already, put out some videos here, and I didn't want to miss out because I've been waiting for some new content for this game. So I'm really excited that we've got a new Planeswalker. I know that the talk on Team MTGSS, I'll say right now, is pretty skeptical, and I think I'm right there as well. Because when I first kind of think about this, how this deck might look, and we're definitely going to look at a build today, although it's a little awkward because we have to use Jace as because she's mainly a blue planeswalker, but she can play six of any color, which I think is how Vivian operates. So it's kind of hard to replicate what the deck might look like, but I think we can actually start, thinking about what it could be. So without further ado, this is Mu Yanling. She is a blue, I would say primarily flying planeswalker. So let's head down to exactly what she does and who she is. So her health is 24. Okay, so I always think about if you're going to play against Chandra, what are you starting at? So you'd be starting at 20, so kind of low, but not like dangerously so. And all right, Tempest Insight. If two or more friendly attacking creatures damage your opponent, draw a card. So the first thing we want to be looking at is it's not like Chart a Course for those Magic players out there where you attack with two creatures so you can draw a card. You can't simply attack, you have to connect, right, with your damage. And I think that is a pretty limiting factor. But it does make me think about Sneak, obviously, and it makes me think about flying, right? So really prioritizing creatures that have evasion. And, Teferi had originally done draws one card when he plays three traps. Now he's up to drawing two cards when he plays three traps. I'm curious, maybe Yanling starts at drawing one card and then switches over to drawing two, right? I could definitely see drawing one card and the deck constraints that she might have might be a little too much. But I think typically the design space has wanted to bring out a planeswalker that's you can get to Mythic with definitely, but maybe is not S tier. And I do think I prefer games that aren't oh, the newest thing is the best thing. So I applaud the team in that way. And then the other note, for deck building, right? Splash of a color. Your deck can have up to six cards of a second color, right? So naturally, I think a lot of us are thinking about pairing it with white, right? Because there are many synergistic cards, but who knows? Maybe there's opportunity for, truly, different types of splashes for her, right? But her main thing, right, is just getting rewarded for damaging her opponent with two attacks, right? So we got to make sure that we're guaranteeing damage. They say it right here, which is great. For new players, it's nice to have a sense of, okay, this is kind of the deck building direction we're supposed to be going in. So we got to get into her signature cards. And I think this first one is one that makes a lot of sense, but we're wondering if it's good enough, right? So it is a 3 mana 1/2 flyer. Pretty underwhelming stats, right? But debut, summon a copy. So, of course, really setting up your passive ability, right? Of having two creatures that hopefully will connect the following turn. Now, let's take in the information for a minute, right? So it's a 3 drop, and let's say your opponent has a mana gem, right? They might be able to kill one of the birds. In certain matchups, they might be able to kill both, right? So this is definitely not guaranteeing you a card, but it's definitely getting you as close as it can. And it does make you start to wonder, okay, well, if I've got strict card advantage where when I play each of my sparrows in my deck, I'm going to get, hopefully a total of 4 sparrows that game. What makes them better, right? And it's buffs. It's anything that can make those creatures stronger inherently is going to really synergize with this type of card. Any way to buff them, right? Any way to, make them have more board presence would be beneficial. So interesting card idea. It's pretty straightforward with what you're trying to do here. And we'll see if it's good enough. I think there are a lot of cheap flyers that honestly might just do a better job. But it might be good enough. I mean, if this was a 3 mana 2/2 that made another 2/2, I guess that would be too strong because you're paying 3 mana to have 4/4 flyer essentially. But I still feel like that might not be that good, just considering how there's a lot of cheap removal in the format, or you're playing right into an infest the following turn from a player who's playing black. So I don't know, definitely giving sort of underpowered vibes so far. Okay, River Dragon. So first thing I think we have to talk about is the mana cost, right? It's 5 mana for a 4/3 flyer, which isn't like the worst rate, right? And it give other friendly creatures +1/+0, right? So really quickly, right? You're getting a bunch of flyers, you're buffing them. So it makes sense that this would be in the deck. I do think that it's a little overcosted. There's so much good efficient removal, namely, Flagrant Foul, right, for 4 mana, and this is costing 5, right? And so I feel like even when you're buffing your board, which is definitely very relevant when you're playing evasive creatures, um, it still just might be too underwhelming in terms of how slow this is. But again, it's really hard. I feel like it's unfair to say like this deck from the get go is looking underpowered. I think it's fair to be skeptical, but like you really can't know until you are really seeing what the play patterns are like with the deck, right? You can say, oh, these cards individually or even together seem like okay or not that good. But you really need to be able to see, like, okay, well, what does an optimal curve look like? What does an average curve look like? Right? So you can judge a book by the cover sometimes. And I'm a little skeptical on how good this is. Um, but I still think this effect, if you're able to really leverage the early evasive bodies that you have in the deck, might just be exactly what the deck needs. So I think we'll have to kind of wait and see. So the last signature card is really interesting, kind of standalone, right? So it's 1 mana, it's a trap. If a friendly creature is targeted by your opponent, counter that spell or effect. First thing we need to know with what this card is doing is, does it affect traps, right? My understanding is that traps, do they have a condition, and then that condition allows them to target a creature. Now, I don't know if that means every trap is targeting necessarily, but that we need to know that. And the reason being is exactly what this says, right? It's allowing you to have a cheap 1-for-1 that protects your evasive creatures. So obviously it protects from removal at like a very very cheap rate, right? Even if they're paying 2 mana, 3 mana, and like we were talking about Flagrant Foul, like 4 mana, if you get them with a Guard the Flock on your like big dragon or something like that, that is pretty backbreaking from what I can gather here. So I'm just curious to see exactly how well does this play with kind of the deck's agenda. Um, does it disrupt the curve? The thing that I like about this, and what I've always really liked about Gideon, and for those who haven't checked out the cool draft videos on my channel, I have a Gideon like fair fight list that I drafted in a cool kind of like cube style draft that we did with the team. So feel free to check that out. But like what I like about Gideon, it was like you would play white creatures and have these cool interactions, and then you could like shove some negates in your deck, which for me, I was always a big fan of like playing aggro, but then having kind of like a way to deal with control or mid range in your sideboard. And Guard the Flock reminds me of that in the sense of a cheap spell that you're gaining some mana advantage and you're protecting your cards and allowing you to keep applying pressure. So overall, I think the design's cool. I would like for aggro to have a more dynamic face in the game. And I don't think it's, I mean, you have plenty of different options for aggro in this game. It's just that when you're playing in high mythic, and I got mythic really quickly this season and kind of haven't grinded as much, uh, hoping to do that in the next coming weeks. It just, you can't really play aggro. You can't. It's just not that good right now, right? Teferi is kind of running rampant against most decks, and I think if you're playing aggro, you should probably just play Domri because you can just run over your opponent by ramping over them. So I hope that this, whether there are new cards down the road, whether the synergies are powerful enough, I hope this deck has a bit more of game against control specifically because of the card advantage from the passive. But I think these signature cards are kind of cool. I mean, I love a big dragon. I love a cool trap that rewards you playing well. And Yanling Sparrow is kind of the biggest question mark for me as to like how good this card is. So I think we should just jump in, at least look at maybe one potential shell. And once the Planeswalker is released, I'm definitely hoping to do a little bit of some content on deck building. So let's hop right over. And I was even just kind of contemplating as I was getting ready for the video of like what I wanted to showcase here. But I wanted to at least show some of the thoughts that the team has been talking about and just a couple ones that I thought could be good. And I do think there are quite a few different directions you could go in. But I think first thing we definitely want to talk about is what land would we be running, right? And since we're a blue Planeswalker, we've got Rooftop Lab, we've got Yawning Portal, Tolarian Academy, Fountain Magic. Now, I do think Tolarian Academy has some inherent synergy if we're really looking into how the deck is constructed. And so we're playing blue, right? And what does blue classically have? Card advantage, flyers, some interaction as well. So I think where Academy can be really helpful is playing Isochron is giving you card advantage, and it's giving you potentially spells that interact with the board, right? And that's going to help you punch through damage. So that's just a kind of a no-brainer when we think about card advantage in blue. Spirit Vial. I'm going to be real. I did not know what this card was until one of my teammates was talking about it. But clearly, having a 2-mana artifact that just makes 2 1/1 flyers for because it's discounted from Tolarian could be really good for this deck, right? So maybe turn 1, you go Griff, or you go Lil Foggy. And no shade to anyone who's never seen this card in their life. It's a 1-mana 1/3 sneak ward. I don't think there's really any deck that should be playing this card. But, and also I think it's very cute and I love it. It's obviously has some synergy here, right? So maybe turn 1, you're going Griff, Lil Foggy, or Arowana, right? And we can talk about that in a little bit. Or you're 1 drop off of Oath of the Paladin into, Spirit Vial, right? So you've got 2 evasive creatures by turn 3. Draw your card. And this is just like pretty good card advantage, right? You're paying 2 mana to get 2 1/1 flyers over 2 turns. And we can only have 6 of a splash color, so I do think we have to think really hard about what are those slots going to be. But I think Oath of the Paladin has always been the cornerstone of effective aggressive strategies in white. Why? Because it just does its job perfectly. You get a 1-drop that gives a little bit of a buff to something. You get a spell that deals damage based on how many creatures you're running, right? So inherently very good with aggro. And then you've got the best spell in Aura of Courage, where for the rest of the game, when a friendly creature attacks, it gets +1/+1. When this resolves and you're playing against aggro, you're just praying that your board is better than theirs the turn that they play it, because it's going to be extremely hard for you to deal with the aftermath. So I think Oath of the Paladin is kind of a no-brainer if you're going to be in white. And then Fledgling Griff, right? Just a really effective 1-mana flyer. And I think the 1 of Spirit Vial kind of makes sense. I don't know that you would want 2 of this card in your deck. Maybe you do for Mu Yanling. But I think 1 is probably going to be good. And, we're just paying attention to the curve here, right? Any artifact that's in this deck is going to cost 1 less. So we're keeping the curve pretty low. Icy Manipulator, I played around with this in a Kiora Tolarian Academy build, and it's pretty effective, right? Stunning a creature means they're not blocking, and if you've got a creature with sneak, right? It's going to retain sneak because it can't block anyway. So that's a really great thing. Phantom Warrior, I always wanted to see this card get played. I just thought it was a cool thing that, like, obviously it's not super, super powerful, but in this build, a 3-mana 3/2 that has perpetual sneak can do some work. And I'm really excited to see cards like this that just have not seen play. So that's really cool. Decorative armor, again, shout out to, I think it was Narash who made that green-blue Kiora sort of Tolarian build, right? This is just a really efficient spell, right? It's going to be 3 mana from Tolarian Academy. So it's 3 mana to have 3 turns where you're making a 3/3 haste, right? And again, you're just trying to flood the board, make them block, make them trade creatures. It's just a great card for that. And personally, very excited for this card because I haven't gotten to play with it yet because it just hasn't been that good. Dungeon Geist, right? We forgot about this guy. He was in Gideon for a bit, maybe still is, but just because Gideon's not tier 1, we're never talking about the good old Geist here. And it's just such a perfect creature, right? It's a 2/2 flyer, perfect body for what, although it costs 4, and then you're locking something down as long as your Geist is live, right? I could just see curves where you're going 1-drop, 2-drop, or like another, like Spirit Vial, right? Turn 3, maybe Glorious Anthem, right? This is a card that I don't know that it's the best card for this deck, but I think about evasion. I think about how do you race your opponent. Okay, Glorious Anthem, right? So you do that, and then you lock down one of their other things, right? And maybe you've got Icy Manipulator and Dungeon Geist going, and you're just drawing extra cards, right? Each drawing an extra card each turn. Who knows? It could be underwhelming, but in my head, these things seem serviceable. Pixie Trickster, obviously we're looking at blue flyers in this deck primarily. This is kind of a no-brainer, right? It's already really good against decks like Liliana. But, a 4-mana 3/1 that can make something not be able to block your flying creatures probably is relevant enough. And then, just kind of the all-star of this sort of strategy, Mistraven, right? It's a 3/3 flyer for 5, and you're going to get to bounce one of their blockers or one of their threats. So, obviously, we got to cut some stuff because we got to play Mu Yanling's signature cards, right? So there are 6 slots that are not in here, and I could have put some other slots, but I think I would want to try the 3-mana flyer that makes another flyer. I think I would want to look at, okay, do I want to play like one of the dragon that pumps everything, 2 of them? My sort of gut feeling is to play maybe 1. I don't know that you want 2 5-mana 4/3s that buff your board because they're not always going to be good. And who knows, maybe you just play 1 Glorious Anthem because you're going to get the dragon that buffs everything else. And then, of course, there's the 1-mana trap that protects your cards. So maybe there's, maybe that should just be in here. I don't know. It's hard to tell how much I want to be curving out and how much I want to be interacting. But let's talk about interaction for a second. Unsummon, not you, Arowana. Unsummon has just been a really, really good blue interactive spell in this meta. So it really makes sense that you would want to be playing that sort of card in this deck. And then I think we even skipped over Welcome Turn and a couple other of these. Just a 2-mana 2/2 flyer, very serviceable, right? And Glorious Anthem, I think we'll see how that all pans out. But if Mu Yanling was released today, this is the sort of shell I would be looking at. And I think really quickly you'll probably figure out, okay, Arowana doesn't really matter, even if I pump it, or the other card that is worth considering with this sort of build is probably Paragon of Balance, right? Namely, because the Yardling or whatever the 1/2 is that makes another 1/2, this makes them into 2/2s, right? So that's pretty relevant. So you might have to go like Oath of Paladin, Fledgling Griffin, 2 Paragon of Balance, and 1 Spirit Vial, or 1 Glorious Anthem. That might be your white splash. Like, Paragon also makes a little foggy into a 3/3, so that's pretty good. Making Arowana into 2/2s. Um, is there anything else that benefits? Not really, but yeah, I think Paragon has always kind of had this really cool role to play in white aggressive strategies, especially ones with armor. Um, but making your 1 mana 1/3 into a 3/3, not bad, right? Maybe not the best. Um, and who knows? Maybe if the paladin can really kind of slot into this deck and be what it needs to be. Maybe not. And then I think the other thing worth considering is probably wizard class, right? Um, Wizard class gives you a flyer, maybe a spell that's helpful, and then you've got elemental mastery for other things. I mean, I think you would have to change the deck into something else where you're just playing more of a mid-range or control strategy, not an aggressive strategy. And I would say I would caveat trying this sort of build when she comes out with you'll probably do well into some aggro matchups, you'll probably do well into some control matchups, but overall aggro is suffering right now. And so maybe it is wise to take a look at more of a mid-range or control build with Mu Yanling, where your passive is more of like a bonus, kind of like Domri right now in the Domri build, where like you're not trying to build a deck to get 3/2 boars with Domri. You're trying to build a deck that does a lot of great stuff, and on top of it, you get a bonus 3/2 boar here and there. Maybe Mu Yanling needs to be played as it's a blue planeswalker that can get card advantage through attacking, and maybe the only thing you need to be attacking are water elementals off of School of the Wizard, or like a couple efficient flying creatures here and there. But I still think it's fun to maybe start out with an aggressive shell. Who knows? Um, so I think that's where we'll wrap up for today. Let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe. Keep the channel growing. I want to keep putting that content out there. Really enjoy this community, and I think it'd be great to hear if other people have other ideas. And as we get closer to the release, I'll probably play with a couple other builds. And once she's released, I'm hoping to get a video up there for you folks ASAP. So, good luck to all y'all blue white aggressive players out there. Hopefully, we've got something fun to play with, and I will catch you all next time. Thank you.